symptoms, don't start Humira if you have an infection.
Join over 250,000 patients who have chosen Humira. Ask about the #1 prescribed biologic by dermatologists. Humira and go. Get in the game. Get the Harlem Globetrotters live. You're not just watching the game, you're in the middle of it. Playing 6 Bay Area games, January 12th through January 21st. Sale at Ticketmaster. Airport Home Appliance is proud to carry and showcase the entire line of luxury appliances from Thermidor. Whether you're an avid host, adventurous chef, a builder, or designer, you owe it to yourself to see the exceptional quality and design that Thermidor has to offer. For a limited time, save up to $7,117 and receive the ultimate gift with purchase of a new Thermidor kitchen. For more information, visit one of Airport Home Appliance's 6 Bay Area locations or visit us online at airportappliance.com. Get in the game. Get the Harlem Globetrotters live. You're not just watching the game, you're in the middle of it. Playing 6 Bay Area games, January 12th through January 21st. Tickets on sale at Ticketmaster.
My bias is toward what I know is supposed to happen in this building years in the White House. How is that not just straight up obstruction of justice? In this White House, you never know what's going to happen next.
Deadline White House with Nicole Wallace. Weekdays at 4 on MSNBC.
The hunt for a new White House chief of staff continues, but how well that hunt is going depends on who you ask. Reports indicate the president is scrambling and having trouble finding a replacement for John Kelly. The Trump claims that candidates are lining up. He tweeted, quote, many, over 10, are vying for White House chief of staff. And he added, quote, why wouldn't someone want one of the truly great and meaningful jobs in Washington? One person on the list of rumored candidates, Congressman Mark Meadows, the House Freedom Caucus.
I'm honored to be considered. You know, I've got one job right now, and that's representing the people of Western North Carolina. That's what I'm focused on. That's what I'll continue to focus on. And yet, at the same time, any time that your name's floated to help the President of the United States accomplish things for the American people, it's flattering.
And joining me now, John Podesta. He served as White House Chief of Staff for Bill Clinton. He was the chairman of Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. He's the founder of the Center for American Progress. John, thank you for taking a few minutes and joining us. Well, okay, you've been Chief of Staff. There's a job opening there right now. I'm assuming you're not interested in getting that old job back right now. But let me ask you, because this is, we saw something interesting the other day where Nick Ayers, who is the Vice President Chief of Staff right now, and I think there was a lot of, there was a strong consensus sort of in the Washington Observer class that he'd be a natural to move in there and be Trump's new Chief of Staff. He seemed to want nothing to do with this job. Do you take do you read any broader significance into that somebody with his background, somebody with his resume wouldn't want that job right now?
Sure, you know, you always blame it on your family, but I think in reality, I don't know Mr. Ayers, but all his profiles are he's a very ambitious guy. You know, he wants to move up, and I think what he's seen is the people who hold that job have their reputation shredded. They leave a lot worse off than they started, and so I think you know, he made the judgment that this is going to be a career ender for him, just the way it was for General Kelly and for Reince Priebus. So I think he's got other ideas and other designs. It sounds like he wants to run for something, and I think he saw this as really the ability to get anything done as being minimal, and the ability to get your reputation tarnished as being great.
When you look at the sort of the traditional model of a White House Chief of Staff, can you see anyone out there? Can you see a way for anybody out there? Any of these names that are being suggested right now, can you see a way for any of them to come in and play that traditional role of Chief of Staff in this administration? Or is this just a completely different model we're kind of looking at here?
Look, not really. I think that President Trump has shown that he doesn't want anyone to run the White House, run the policy process, you know, essentially run the government. He undercuts the chief of staff at every turn. So I think he's looking for two things: someone who's willing to uphold justice when he needs to, and someone who's willing to protect his family at all costs. Not interested that much in the country, only interested in his own, you know, the personal protection of him and his family. And you know, Mark Meadows has been kind of trying that out for a couple of years in the way he's conducted himself in his attacks on the Mueller investigation. So maybe he ought to be the leading candidate at this point.
We've been talking this hour about those filings from the Southern District of New York, the possibility there that the president, perhaps when he leaves office, the possibility he'd be charged with a crime in connection with directing payments counter to campaign finance laws covering up the politically damaging affair during the 2016 campaign. The White House, where you were chief of staff, the final 2 years there of Bill Clinton's presidency, there was also all of that speculation about when Bill Clinton left office, would he be charged by the independent counsel? And he cut that deal on his final day in office right there that avoided any charges of being brought. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like as a chief of staff with that issue hanging over your head?
Well, look, I don't think we thought there was any chance that in fact there was any criminal liability there. We had gone through the impeachment trial. He was acquitted in the Senate. But Mr. Starr's successor was hanging around. I think the president decided it was just as easy to get rid of it as planning and practice law in Arkansas any longer, and it put an end to it. So I think Mr. Trump's in a somewhat different situation. Remember, this is not Mr. Mueller who's doing this investigation. This is the Southern District of New York, the career prosecutors there, and they clearly have implicated him in serious campaign finance violations, and whether they would consider charging him once he's left office or not, is anybody's guess. But I think he has problems galore because he can't seem to tell the truth. He denied most of this up until the time that it was, the facts ultimately came out. And if you look at the people who have pled guilty, the senior members of his team, his national security advisor, his former campaign chair, etc., one of the things that's common with all of them is in trying to protect him, they've all lied to federal authorities. Those are crimes, and we're not privy to what Mr. Trump said in his written communications to Mr. Mueller, but they certainly seem to have a hard time telling the truth.
Also, we mentioned, the Southern District of New York, the issues with the campaign in 2016, but at the sort of the heart of all this before the last couple of days was just the question of Russia, of its role in the 2016 campaign, of contacts between folks in Trump's orbit, folks in Putin's orbit. You see a graphic on your screen there. 14 Trump associates now known to have been approached by the Russians during the 2016 campaign. I guess let me ask you this, because the issue of Trump and Russia was one that was out there very much, obviously, during the 2016 campaign. It's something that your campaign talked about. What do you know now, 2 years later, that you didn't know during the 2016 campaign?
Our campaign manager, Robbie Mook, just did an op-ed in the Washington Post that laid this out. We knew most of what we know now back in the summer of 2016. And I think from our perspective, unfortunately, the press covered it as just politics and didn't take it very seriously. We were screaming about it, and it was viewed as somehow that we were just trying to spin, when the reality was the Russians were directly interfering with the democratic process in the United States. And we now know that there were 97, the Center for American Progress were, which I founded, keeps running track of this. There were 97 contacts. There were 24 meetings between members of representatives of the Trump campaign and Russian agents. And it smells a lot like collusion to us, but we thought that back in the summer of 2016 as well.
All right, John Podesta, the chairman of the Clinton campaign in 2016. Thanks for taking a few minutes.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, in just a few minutes, the case of Donald Trump's former campaign chairman will go back before a judge in Washington today. Paul Manafort's lawyers are expected to argue that Manafort never intentionally lied to prosecutors. In a sentencing memo filed last Friday, Robert Mueller alleged that Manafort had broken his plea agreement by not being truthful about his contacts with Russians and not being forthcoming about continued contact with the administration. Manafort's attorneys plan to file a response to Mueller this week. Joining us, News national security and justice reporter Julia Ainsley. So, Julia, what can we expect out of that court appearance today?
So, Steve, I'll be coming into this courthouse in just a few minutes. Behind me, it looks like it would be a routine scheduling conference. Judge Amy Berman Jackson scheduled this for today, but the reason there may be some more news here is that the defense requested to move it up. This was originally supposed to be tomorrow. We don't think Paul Manafort will be here. He waived the right to his appearance. But we also know that the defense is working on a response. That was in response to that crimes and lies document that the Mueller team laid out on Friday that showed that Paul Manafort was in breach of his plea agreement, primarily because he lied about his contacts with Konstantin Kilimnik, with known ties to the Kremlin, and the big surprise, his ties to the White House as recently as February 2018. Big news would be if we find out who that is today or later this week when the defense does file. So we'll be paying attention to a lot of things here, but there are a lot of indications this might not just be a routine scheduling conference.
And what happens beyond, say, there's some interesting potential fortune, but what happens beyond that? I think this thing took a turn last week or two, unfortunately, necessarily expected.
Yeah, it did. I mean, what we were expecting was just a routine sentencing. We knew that Paul Manafort had pleaded guilty and he was ready to cooperate, and then they ripped all that up. So what comes next is the defense trying to say he did cooperate, he didn't intentionally lie, them trying to defend that in order to try to kind of stave their client off from what would be a very lengthy sentencing. He was already sentenced for those crimes in Alexandria, and he faces more charges here. So Paul Manafort is looking at right now being one of the least cooperative witnesses to presumably cooperate in all of this. We know that Michael Flynn, for example, is someone the prosecution is very happy with, that he really did hand a lot over. Cohen looks like a mixed bag, depending on what he told different teams, and Manafort was really in the most hot water because he wasn't forthcoming. So we're going to see all of that now play out in real time in court and see what comes next. And of course, this isn't the only thing we're watching this week. Cohen's sentencing is tomorrow, and Maria Butina will also come to this court tomorrow when she enters into her plea agreement, which could also have implications for the Mueller investigation.
And also you have the Michael Flynn matter finally wrapping up, but obviously on a different note than the Manafort one.
That's right, because he has been more cooperative, and Mueller's team has suggested that he really not look at any time behind bars because of his military service and the fact that he was so forthcoming and that he's cooperated on so many levels. But then again, you look at Paul Manafort, someone like in this position where he really didn't come forward. And I think what will be really key in this is the fact that Manafort continued to lie not only after he was charged, but in the thick of the plea agreement where he agreed to come forward and tell everything. He still didn't say that he had been in touch with White House officials. And as we're looking toward the rest of this week, if that name comes forward, that's when this doesn't just become about Paul Manafort, but it becomes about this administration. If they continue to have contacts with Paul Manafort, knowing the trouble he was in, and while they distance themselves from him on a public stage, if they continue to talk to him behind the scenes during this legal trouble, that could be spell a lot of problems for this administration.
All right, NBC's Julia Ainsley in Washington. Julia, thank you for that. And House Democrats, meanwhile, are not letting up on the president following Friday's release of multiple court filings from the special counsel in the Southern District of New York on Donald Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen. A ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff, even went so far as to say the president could be facing jail time.
There's a very real prospect that on the day Donald Trump leaves office, the Justice Department may indict him, that he may be the first president in quite some time to face the real prospect of jail time.
Joining me now, Democrat from California and member of the Intelligence Committee, Congresswoman Jackie Spear. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us. Let me ask you, do you agree with your colleague from California, who we just played there, that that's a realistic possibility, and do you think that that's something that should happen?
So I would suggest that there's that possibility. I think that what we are more concerned with right now, though, is the corrupting effect that the presidency has had, not just on the president, but so many people in his orbit. I mean, when you look at the fact that you have his campaign manager, his assistant campaign manager, his national security advisor, his attorney, his advisor on foreign affairs, all of them have now either pled guilty or have been convicted. And that should say to all of us, we have someone in the presidency right now who is not capable to do the job of the President of the United States. And we haven't even begun to look at his activities as it relates to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, where he has had so many deals, where he has been part and parcel of laundering money from Russians and others into projects both in Soho, in the Panama property, and in the Canadian property as well.
Damn it.
Incoming Democratic chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler from New York the other day, who would preside over any impeachment hearings if it did come to that, said that this issue specifically with Michael Cohen, with the hush money payments during the campaign and with the filings from the Southern District, where Cohen said that Trump had directed him to do that would be impeachable. Do you share that assessment?
Well, I think it's an impeachable offense in that he had directed the payments. It was intended to violate the federal laws as it relates to campaign contributions, and it was done intentionally so that the women would not speak up and throw the election to Hillary Clinton. So it was a rigged campaign, all right. It was rigged by Donald Trump. Now, we've seen it from that component. What we're still looking at, of course, is was it also rigged in conjunction with the Russians and WikiLeaks, which if that were to come to be, then you have a very explosive situation on your hands.
We led the hour, and we'll be talking, I think, for some time about that meeting today between Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic leader in the House, Chuck Schumer, Democratic leader in the Senate, and the President in the Oval Office. This issue of a potential partial government shutdown at the end of next week.
Should have at least
over
checked.
border funding. Here was an exchange there between the President and Nancy Pelosi, with the President insisting he had the votes in the House to get his way on this.
The House would give me the vote if I wanted it, but I can't because I need, Nancy, I need 10 votes from Chuck.
Let me say something.
The fact is, you do not have the votes in the House.
Nancy, I do. And we need border security. Nancy, we need border security. It's very simple.
Congresswoman, who's right there? Republicans still have a majority in the House for the next couple of weeks. Does Trump have the votes there right now for that money he's looking for the wall?
I don't think he does, or he'd put them up. Now, show me the votes. Instead of show me the money, show me the votes. He could do that in a moment's notice. He could set up that opportunity to test out his theory that he has the votes. I don't think he has the votes in the House. He certainly doesn't have the votes in the Senate. If he wants to shut down this government, it is in his power to do so, but it's going to be all on him. He has the control of the House, the Senate, and he is the executive, all at one party. So this is not the time to
get away from the lip.
Play politics with
no, get right on the lip.
Or with the
better
running of government. Social Security recipients should be able to get their checks and not be part of his little gamesmanship. He's acting like he's a cornered animal, and he lashes out. That's not the description of any president that I want in charge of our country.
All right, Congresswoman Jackie Spear from California, thank you for taking a few minutes.
Thank you.
All right, and next, it is already time for 2020 straw polls. How about this? There is a new one. We've got results. Who is on top of the first big Democratic straw poll for 2020? Straight ahead.
Stay there.
So what's the plan? The plan is to take over the damn place. Fox has more Golden Globe nominations than any movie this year. Hot damn. Best Picture of the Year. Bush approved all of this? No. You rascal.
God, fucking, oh my goodness.
Terrifying. Vice.
You gotta be kidding me.
Christmas Day.
What the fuck are you doing on these shots?
With two swappable batteries and maximum suction, the Shark INF80 has more runtime than the Dyson V10 Absolute. Or choose the upright mount for whole home cleaning, only from Shark. Shopping for home on Wayfair is so easy. You should make a jingle. Wayfair, you make home shopping easy.
Wait, that sounds familiar.
These new tools make my shopping a breeze.
It's worse. That's cool.
How about Wayfair? You know just what I need.
No, it's not good. Discover easier home shopping at Wayfair, where it's fine and unlined.
Our dad was in the hospital.
Because of smoking.
Still had to have a cigarette.
Had to.
But then we were like,
What are we doing?
The Nicoderm CQ patch helps prevent your urge to smoke all day. Nicoderm CQ. You know why, we know how.
At Booking.com, we can't guarantee you'll find gold on your next vacation, but we can guarantee the best price on that there rental cabin or any hotel, home, Don't get carried away with the Wild West. Get the best price on homes, hotels, and so much more. Booking.com. Booking.yeah.
Alexa, tell ADT to set goodnight mode. Turn down service. Brought to you by AGT. A smart home with 24/7 protection. Designed and installed just for you.
George woke up in pain, but he has plans today. So he took a leave.
Just so shitty.
If he'd taken Tylenol, he'd be stopping for more pills right now. Only Aleve has the strength to stop tough pain for up to 12 hours with just one pill. Aleve, all day strong.
Okay.
Let's stick to the driving range games. You make yourself a pretty penny in those long drive contests.
Stop thinking about your life and your job.
Calm, an app to reduce your stress, to relax your mind, and to help you sleep.
Find a few moments of quiet and tranquility.
Calm, download the free app now.
With my bladder leakage, the products I tried just didn't fit right. They were too loose. Getting in the way about camping trips. But with the range of sizes, Depend Fit Flex is made for me.
With a range of sizes for all body types, Depend Fit Flex underwear is guaranteed to be your best fit.
The fact of the matter was, he was a crook. This is a story that is not well known, but it really should be.
Rachel Maddow and MSNBC present Bad Men. Binge all 7 episodes now.
More Americans watch NBC News than any other news organization in the world.
Well, today we have an early straw poll of the Democratic free-for-all for 2020. Now, this straw poll from the progressive group MoveOn.org was obtained exclusively by NBC News, and it shows. Look at this. Congressman Beto O'Rourke from Texas topping the list of names, narrowly in front of former Vice President Joe Biden. The actual winner, important to stress this though, was someone else, or I don't know. Almost 30% of those who participated in this straw poll chose that option. But among the actual names, Beto O'Rourke, 15.6%. Joining me now, NBC News political reporter Alex Seitz-Walt, who obtained this straw poll result. The Southern Regional Director for Obama's 2012 campaign, Theron Johnson. He's currently the CEO of the Paramount Consulting Group. Alex, let me start with you. You got this. Tell us a little bit about it. I think Beto being in first place there, a bit of a surprise, although there's been a lot of buzz about him lately. Move on. How big is the membership? How broad? Who are the folks we're talking about here who are choosing him above any other name?
Yeah, Steve. So this is the first straw poll of 2020 of Move On members. Move On, you probably know, it's a very large progressive advocacy group. Billions of members across the country, been around for about 30 years. These are kind of the door knockers, the phone bankers, the small donors of the Democratic Party. There's a lot of them. So this is people who are going to be very involved and very active in the Democratic primary process. Why we're very interested to see where their
garbage
is right now. I was surprised to see
buttered
Beto at the top of this list. He's been getting a lot of attention nationally, even though he narrowly lost his campaign against Senator Ted Cruz. But Move On tends to be on the left side of the spectrum. They endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2016. Overwhelmingly, 78% of their members in 2016 voted to endorse Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton. And now Sanders is down at number 3 on that list. They were also very supportive of Elizabeth Warren in 2016. They tried to draft her into the presidential contest, and she's even further down the list at about 6% support. So that's not a great sign for either of them, and a good bit of news for Beto O'Rourke.
Yeah, and Theron, look, the asterisk, whatever you want to put in all of these, it's early, the field is very broad right now, we don't know who's actually going to run. All of these things are true, and yet decisions are being made, steps are being taken, alliances are being created right now. They eventually lock some of this stuff in. At an earlier point that I think a lot of folks realize, they call this process, I think, the invisible primary season. What do you make of these results?
Well, you just said a lot what I was going to say, but to really give you a little bit more red meat, I'm going to tell you this. I think that right now, if you're Joe Biden, and Alex just did a really good job of sort of explaining what Move On has done across the country, a lot of their members, a very progressive organization, for him to actually be number 2 in his poll is a good sense for him. But at a time where we know that a lot of these presidential hopefuls are staffing up, they're looking at who can run the campaign, what consultants they want to actually try to get on board if they decide to run. And it also really, really helps with fundraising. But look, if you're Beto right now, you just came out of a U.S. a Senate race where you spent over $70 million and you're number one in any straw poll, that's a good sign. But it is extremely early. I mean, let's not forget, back in 2014, when we were coming off the midterm elections, when Democrats were in charge, you had Speaker Paul Ryan, who was number 2, former Governor Jeb Bush, who was number 1, and you had...
Oh, I'm so glad I didn't read that.
A straw poll that was done amongst Republicans,
Little
and they went
chicken
on
arm.
to elect Donald Trump as president.
No follow through, and the link popped up.
Fundraising, absolutely. Is it very early? Very, very early. It's too close to call. There are probably going to be upwards to almost 15 candidates running for president on the Democratic side. But I tell you this, if you're Tom Perez right now, I know the DNC is having some fundraisers in D.C. You feel really good about the positions that Democrats are in right now in this country, because no matter who you select as our
make a putt.
you will have a good group of candidates to choose from.
But I'm curious, Beto, it's just so interesting, a candidate
Not
coming
that hard.
off a statewide
Just
loss
hit the
and
ball
being
and make
touted
it.
this way and finishing first in a straw poll like this. Black voters in particular, especially in southern primaries, a very important factor in Democratic presidential nominating politics right now. We have news here. NBC News has been reporting about Beto in the last few weeks reaching out to Al Sharpton, reaching out to Andrew Gillum, the defeated Democratic gubernatorial candidate in Florida. You have a field that's emerging here. Kamala Harris may run from California. Cory Booker may run from New Jersey. You may have multiple black candidates. In terms of cultivating black support, how positioned is Beto O'Rourke right now?
Well, he's really using sort of a Hillary Clinton, sort of Bill Clinton model. I mean, you just hit the nail on the head. We know that there's been a lot of talks about this southern firewall. You know, here in Georgia, the person who usually wins Georgia is really in a good position to win the nomination. But at a time where there's been some talks about moving Texas up on the schedule as far as the nomination for the Democratic nominee, I mean, it puts him in a good point. But at the end of the day, I think that this is authenticity. You know, one of the things that you saw from his Senate race is that he was very authentic. When he gave his concession speech, he was very authentic. He had some choice words for his audience, and I think really riled up that crowd. But again, just reaching out to a person like Al Sharpton is a good gesture. But Al Sharpton does not speak for all African Americans. He does carry the message that we care deeply about. But I think when you have African American candidates in the race, it's going to be very hard for a non-African American candidate to defeat those folks in primary elections. And we've seen that all across the country with some of the gubernatorial races that we just went through.
All right, Theron Johnson and Alex Sykes-Paul. Alex, again, who broke this story, got these results. Alex, thank you for joining us, too. Good job on that. And we have one more thing for you next. The message 44 former senators just sent to the men and women who now sit on Capitol Hill.
The meeting of the Executive Finance Committee is now in session and adjourned. Business loans for eligible card members up to $50,000 decided in as little as 60 seconds. The powerful backing of American Express. Don't do business without it.
Successful in business, you've got to navigate a lot of moving parts. On your business, we've got your back with expert advice on topics from getting funding to creating eye-catching marketing. And each week we'll focus on ideas for growing your business, bringing all the moving parts together. Join me weekend mornings at 7:30 on MSNBC or connect with us anytime on all your devices.
Sponsored by the powerful backing of American Express. Don't do business without it. You're in the business of helping people. We're in the business of helping you. Business loans for eligible card members up to $50,000 decided in as little as 60 seconds. The American Express. Don't do business without it.
How the fuck do you miss that?
If so, you do have a choice.
Fuckity fuck.
Laser Spine Institute and say yes to a pain-free life with our minimally invasive spine surgery. It's safer than open back surgery, letting you get back to living life on your terms. I can lift my son high over my head again. If you have spinal stenosis, bulging or herniated disc, sciatica, or other chronic spine conditions,
call 1-800-467-BACK now for your free MRI review.
Thanks to a less than 1-inch incision, you'll be up and walking within hours of surgery, so you can get back to your life in days instead of weeks.
No.
I feel like Laser Spine Institute was an answer to prayer.
Join the thousands of people every year who say goodbye to chronic neck and back pain with Laser Spine Institute. Make today the day you say yes to living a pain-free life.
Call 1-800-467-BACK now for your free MRI review.
Sometimes the best time is time you make for yourself. Aveeno Daily Moisturizing Lotion improves skin hydration in just 1 day. And for twice the moisture, try the body wash too. Aveeno, naturally beautiful results.
Ordinary eggs? Not in this house, because that's no ordinary family. That's your family, which is why you didn't grab just any cheese. You picked up new Kraft expertly paired cheddar and Swiss for eggs. Beat that. Kraft. Family greatly.
Ovation believes in the power of art to inspire our lives. That's why we created Stand for the Arts. We're going into communities around the country and supporting local organizations who bring the power of art to their neighborhoods. Visit standforthearts.com to learn more.
Brought to you locally by NorCalSweeps.com. Your new place for sweepstakes, local events, and promotions from around Northern California. NorCalSweeps.com.
From unsolicited sexual advances to age.
Didn't have any freaking problem with these yesterday.
Associates and the William Law Firm have combined their expertise, resources, and an unwavering commitment to represent victims of sexual harassment and work discrimination. This unacceptable behavior deprives individuals of the ability to work and thrive in a professional environment and needs to be stopped now. If you are experiencing any harassment or discrimination at work, call us for a free and confidential consultation.
And one more thing before we go, a bipartisan group of former U.S. senators has dropped an op-ed in the
yeah.
warning that our country
It's not a safe stream for at work. Unless I'm playing well.
They feel obligated
Then
to
it's
address
very
serious
safe.
challenges to the rule of law as we appear to near the end of the special counsel investigation. 44 former senators signed this in all.
Fuck, so there's a fuckity in there.
Independent, saying that, quote, during critical moments in our history, when constitutional crises have threatened our foundations, it's been the Senate that stood in defense of our democracy, and today is once again such a time. During our service in the Senate, at times we were allies and at other times opponents, but never enemies. We are at an inflection point in which the foundational principles of our democracy and our national security law and the ability of our institutions to function freely and independently must be upheld. Regardless of party affiliation, ideological leanings, or geography, as former members of this great body, we urge current and future senators to be steadfast and zealous guardians of our democracy by ensuring that partisanship or self-interest not replace national interest. That is going to wrap things up for this hour. I'm Steve Kornacki in for Katie Turk. And Ali Velshi is going to pick things up right now. Ali.
All right, Steve, thanks very much. It's a busy news afternoon. You have a good one. I'm Ali Velshi. A reality tremor. That's what one official said to Axios when describing the awakening within President Trump's orbit after last week's court filings on the Russia investigation. And any minute now, the defense team of former Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort will appear in court to respond to special counsel Robert Mueller's finding that Manafort lied to federal prosecutors. But the legal quagmire with the special counsel's investigation is not the main issue drawing the president's ire.
Whatever.
At least not today. Today, it's a Trump shutdown. That's the phrase coined by current House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi after a meeting in the Oval Office with the president and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. Things became visibly tense after the president repeated his demands for more money to build a border wall and even threatened a government shutdown.
I also know that, Nancy is in a situation where it's not easy for her to talk right now.
Mr. President, please don't characterize the strength that I bring to this meeting as a leader of the House Democrats who just won a big victory.
Let me say something, Mr. President. You just say my way or we'll shut down the government. We have a proposal that the Democrats and Republicans will support to do a CR that will not shut down the government. We urge you to take it.
And if it's not good border security,
it is very good. And it's the same word. You're bragging about what has been done. We want to do the same thing we did last year, this year. That's our proposal. If it's good then, it's good now, and it won't shut down the government.
Chuck, we can build a much bigger section.
Let's debate in private. Okay? Yeah, let's debate in private.
If we don't get what we want, one way or the other,
birdies.
Through military, through anything you want to call, I will shut down the government.
Okay.
It's worth noting that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi said several times to the president, let's not do this in public, let's do this privately. In case you're wondering about world reaction, let me show you what Wall Street did. What the market's gains disappeared right after Trump threatened to shut down the government over border wall funding. All right, with that, let's begin with NBC News White House correspondent Jeff Bennett. Jeff, that was kind of wild. That was a lot of direct confrontation. I think those kinds of discussions.
I can't stay off the left side on this freaking hole.
Typically, they have
it don't really matter though.
They do, and certainly, Allie, this is a preview of what divided government in the Trump era will look like. Plenty of drama and plenty of disagreement. And to get to the core of what that extraordinary exchange was all about, President Trump, as we all know, has been threatening a shutdown for months over his demand to fully fund this wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, one that he's been asking for since the 2016 presidential campaign, despite saying over and over again that Mexico wants to pay. But here's the thing. He wants far more money than Democrats, and even some Republicans have been willing to give him. And so we saw today Nancy Pelosi repeatedly try to explain to the president that there wasn't enough support in the GOP-controlled House for this border wall. She was urging him to accept a spending bill at the current spending levels. Chuck Schumer, we just saw there, said, look, if you like your current border security situation, you get to keep it. But Trump kept interjecting to shift blame that it wouldn't matter since he needs to get 60 votes in the Senate anyway, and that has been a frequent complaint of his. So this back and forth culminated with Senator Schumer baiting President Trump into accepting blame for a government shutdown in less than 2 weeks' time. Take a look at how it went down.
And I'll tell you what, I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck, because the people of this country don't want criminals and people that have lots of problems and drugs going into our country. So I will take the mantle. I will be the one to
That's
shut it down.
really bad.
The last time you shut it down, it didn't work. I will take the mantle of shutting down. And I'm going to shut it down for border security.
Fucking great.
Thank you very much, everybody.
So earlier this year, Senate Democrats and Republicans agreed to $1.6 billion in border wall money, and that could probably be where all sides end up. But to pull back just a little bit, despite President Trump's attempts to demonize Nancy Pelosi on the campaign trail, I'm told by several sources that he actually likes her. He thinks that she's a worthy opponent. I'm told the president actually likes Chuck Schumer too. Both of them, as you know, are roughly the same age. They're both New Yorkers with healthy egos. It's one of the reasons why Trump toward the end of that
fucking shot on the course.
Said, look, we're not actually all disagreeing that much. But whatever semblance of a working relationship exists between the three of them, today it hit the buzzsaw of base politics. The Democratic base isn't having any part of the Donald Trump border wall. They're not going to allow him to claim victory on that, especially since it derives from what they see as his thinly veiled, xenophobic, anti-immigrant pitch. And Trump, as we know, derives the core connection to his base on this issue of border security. So at this point, both sides are dug in, and there's no real offer on either side out. Yeah, that was pretty remarkable.
Stupid mistakes.
Whether the White House thought that meeting was going to go that way or wanted to, because the entire world got to see that dysfunction straight up in person. All right, Jeff, thanks very much, Jeff Bennett, for us at the White House. The budget extension keeping the government continuing resolution expires next Friday, or that they would need a continuing resolution to keep it going. House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy announced today that House Republicans would be out of session this coming Monday and Tuesday, leaving only a total of 5 days to avert the shutdown. For the latest on Capitol Hill, let's get to MSNBC's.
That's beautiful.
Garrett, it was hard, if you're watching that thing live, as we were, to keep track of who was saying what about what votes, but Leader Pelosi says the president doesn't have the votes to get this funding right now. He said he does. Give us some clarity on this.
Well, he may not, and we won't know until we see a vote. House Republicans have been sitting on a bill that would have that $5 billion in it, and they haven't brought it up for a floor vote yet. Paul Ryan was asked about it this morning. He said, well, what's the point until we know what the Senate can pass? But Nancy Pelosi is the best of her kind in terms of counting votes, and the theory here is that Republicans have a tough time corralling their own caucus here over the last 2 years, would now find themselves in a situation where they may not have enough people sticking around after the midterm drubbing who want to vote for $5 billion for a border wall, who they can keep all of their cats so herded, if you will, that they could get those votes on their own. So we might not ever find out if Republicans have the votes or not. And now it's interesting that all of this happens, listening to Jeff, against the backdrop where there's probably some big bipartisan success stories that are starting to happen in this Congress in the next 2 weeks. The Senate's going to vote on a farm bill this afternoon. The House will vote on it probably later this week. It's something that has to be done every 5 years. They've got that hammered out. And now we learned today that Mitch McConnell's going to move this bipartisan criminal justice reform bill to the Senate floor. That's expected to pass with a big margin, too. And while the House is not exactly overflowing with a sense of urgency here, you mentioned they won't be here Monday and Tuesday, the Senate's trying to cram quite a bit into their last few working days. Here was Mitch McConnell talking about that to reporters just a few minutes ago.
I've asked both Senator Schumer and our own colleagues to help us get through all of the additional items that we have. Obviously, shoehorning criminal justice into that complicates the number of things we have to do between now and the end of the year. But with maximum cooperation, magic things happen at Christmas. That's what I'm counting on.
And lawmakers will need some magic if they're going to get home for Christmas. Because right now, this is a three-person operation. This really is essentially the president and the two Democratic leaders here negotiating. And in fact, just after Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer came out and said, hey, Mitch McConnell needs to get involved here. He doesn't want to see a government shutdown either. He needs to pick up the phone and call the president and tell him that Republicans don't want to see this happen either. But all signs are, Ali, that once again we will find ourselves right up against that December 21st deadline here next Friday.
All right, Garrett, thanks very much. Garrett Haake for us on Capitol Hill. Now, during that Oval Office sit-down, the president also made a lot of claims about the current situation at the border.
So a lot of wall has been built. We don't talk about that, but we might as well start because it's building. It's being built right now.
Uno más. Uno más.
In San Diego, illegal traffic dropped 92% once the wall was up. El Paso, illegal traffic dropped 72%, then ultimately 95% once the wall was up. In Tucson, Arizona, illegal traffic dropped 92%.
Almost immediately, Chuck Schumer challenged those claims.
The Washington Post today gave you a whole lot of Pinocchios because they say you constantly misstate how much the wall is built, how much of the wall is built, and how much is there. But that's not the point here. Not on border security, but on the wall. We do not want to shut down the government.
All right, James has visited the border. He's seen the president's wall prototypes firsthand. He joins me now, and I just want to be clear. They are wall prototypes. The president, as Chuck Schumer said, got a lot of Pinocchios from the Washington Post about these comments. Can you just fact check that a little for us?
Yeah, so what you're looking at, Ali, right now are those prototypes that I visited back in September of 2017. The president visited in March of 2018. Let's be super clear. Not 1 inch of any wall that looks anything like the pictures you're seeing on the left-hand side of your screen has been built anywhere along the southwest border of the United States of America. In the budget request for this year, the one that was ultimately approved by Congress, replacement border fencing, bollard-style fencing that President George W. Bush used, President Obama used, and some new bollard-style
that's not going to work.
But explicitly, Congress prevented President Trump from building anything that looks anything like you're looking at on your screen right now, including in the first place the president wanted to build new wall, the Santa Ana Wildlife Refuge, where I visited in South Texas.
The other thing the president claimed, we didn't play that in this instance, but he claimed it at another point in that meeting. He said that terrorists are coming into the country across the border. What do you make of that?
Look, what the president is talking about is not terrorists or suspected terrorists that are coming through the southwest border. He talked about 10 suspected terrorists that are coming into the country or caught trying to come into the country a day. I spoke with DHS immediately after the president said this, and a number of things referred to are people on terrorist watch lists, which, by the way, we know often are wrong and ensnare people who may have similar names to people on those watch lists. Not at the southwest border, but at any port of entry in the United States of America. That could be airports,